We're days away from Trump's reciprocal tariff becoming a reality, which will obviously affect India. His reciprocal tariff move will come into effect on April 2nd. So India right now is moving in every direction to kind of soften the blow by taking a series of steps. And so we'll begin this broadcast with that aspect of India's response and talks that are underway. So let's begin by talking about how India is doing this. We're open to cutting tariffs on more than half of US imports worth $23 billion in the first phase of a trade deal that the two nations are negotiating. This is what our sources are telling us. So if that happens, it'll be the biggest cut in years aimed at fending off reciprocal tariffs. India is reportedly open to reducing tariffs on 55% of US goods, in fact, the imports that are now subject to tariffs ranging somewhere between 5 to 30%. So all of this is on the table right now. India is ready essentially to substantially lower tariffs or even scrap some entirely on imported goods that are worth more than $23 billion from the United States. So what does that mean? Well, tariff on meat, maize, wheat and dairy products that now range somewhere between 30 to 60% are off the table. So none of these will get cut. Now, those on almonds, and these are tariffs on almonds, on pistachio, on oatmeal, quinoa, that may be eased. So that's where really the government is looking at perhaps easing some of the tariffs. You could also see for a phased cut in automobile tariffs, now effectively more than 100%. This is one of the biggest bones of contention. So the government is looking at maybe phased cuts on this, not immediate cuts. I will see how that progresses. These are the steps that India is considering, is what our sources are telling us. Essentially taking steps to control the reciprocal tariffs. Let's talk about why. What really will be the impact of the reciprocal tariffs on India? Well, the estimated impact of reciprocal tariff is this. Increase of 6% to 10% in tariffs on items such as pearls, mineral fuels, machinery, boilers, electrical equipment, which make up essentially half its exports to America. Due to reciprocal tax, you're going to see $11 billion worth of pharma and automotive exports essentially seeing the most disruptive impact due to reciprocal tariff, given the dependency that they have on the US market. Such reciprocal tariffs would hit 80% of total exports to America. You look at that worth, that's worth $66 billion. It's because of this impact that India is now looking at kind of cutting some of the tariffs so the reciprocal tariff doesn't hit us as bad. So what exactly is being done on this front? Well, the Assistant US Trade Representative for South and Central Asia is on a 5-day visit. Brendan Lynch is in India, so he'll be holding talks with Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal, besides meeting a number of senior Indian officials where it's hoped some agreement will be reached to control reciprocal tariffs. So we've listed out to you the reasons why India is really looking at reducing reciprocal tariffs and also how they have a deadline of April 2nd. There is, of course, a lot of speculation that when he announces the reciprocal tariffs on April 2nd, it may not be as bad as I showed you. That there's a possibility that Trump will soften the blow for India. And that's because there's also been a lot of talks between India and America. Brendan Lynch is, in fact, currently in India on a 5-day visit. He's scheduled to meet with Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal. Let's bring in Geeta Mohan, a Foreign Affairs editor, for more details on this. Geeta, even as, of course, India and the government is looking at what steps need to be taken to ensure the reciprocal tariff doesn't hit us as bad on April 2nd, give us details of what kind of dialogue we're currently having with America.
Well, at this moment, we do know that there were a lot of engagements by Dr. Jaishankar, who was in the United States of America. He did engage the new administration. Then we had the Prime Minister himself. And at the highest level, there's one decision that's been taken, Akshita, and that has to do with a trade deal between India and the United States of America by fall this year. That really means that the two sides, the commerce departments of both countries, will have to get started on negotiations, which is why we are seeing this early visit of Brendan Lynch. He is here. He's in New Delhi, and in all probability, we'll see the official talks kick off tomorrow with the nuance of the BTA bilateral trade agreement between the two sides being worked out, where the focus will be, and like you rightly said and you pointed out, details on reciprocal tariffs. The focus would be on tariffs for America. It's very important that India ease up on the high tariff rates that it imposes on goods that are imported into India. But we again will have to wait and see how India is going to navigate that space, because it is to kick off on the 2nd of April. It could hit India badly. So India would want a carve out, a waiver to not have those reciprocal tariffs levied from the 2nd of April. But what are the areas where India is going to give in is something we'll have to wait and see.
All right, Geeta, thanks for those details. Let me also bring in now Karishma Sudania of Business Today TV with us on this broadcast to kind of explain what really the government can do here to soften the reciprocal tariff blow. There is a lot of talk about us also taking steps to slice some of the tariffs that we impose on America. And therefore, on April 2nd, when any announcement is made, it's much lesser than the impact that we're expecting. Karishma Sudani is joining us with more details on that. Karishma, take us through really what your sources are telling you. Where could we see some tariff cuts on India's part before April 2nd?
I think the big stuff that has to be looked into is what kind of middle ground both the countries find when it comes to reciprocal tariff. And the US team, which is in India, is going to now focus on trying to find this middle ground. Let's not forget that Trump yesterday has said that they will try their best not to put these tariffs on a higher note, just the way India has done. And sources are indicating that India may go for a 55% tariff cut, which is going to be very big, knowing the fact that our tariffs comparatively have been higher, though on an average they've been between 10 to 17%. Now, US is very clear that they will not go on sectoral tariffs, but they may go on broader tariffs. And these broader tariffs, come may what, will also come on India.
All right, Karishma, thanks very much for joining us with those details. We'll see what really happens now in the days to come. April 2nd, just a few days away from that particular deadline. And clearly, the government is figuring out what really should be the response. But interestingly, we spoke, of course, to External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, who was at the Business Today Mind Rush event over the weekend, where he made it clear that India will put its own interests first in future trade deals, much like America first. We've always stressed on India first. But Dr. Jaishankar also spoke about free trade agreements, that they're no longer just economic tools, but also important strategic choices.
The underlying issue has been the accumulated consequences of over-concentrated manufacturing, as well as massive subsidies and sectoral protection. The full impact of that was visible during the COVID pandemic on the fragility of supply chains. The Ukraine conflict created an additional set of concerns, especially those pertaining to food, to fuel, and to fertilizers. And when sourcing from key producers became challenging, its ripple impact actually spread across all businesses and all geographies. The fighting that we have seen since October 2023 in West Asia or the Middle East has added another dimension, because we have seen maritime shipping disrupted, and this has particular consequences for the Asia-Europe traffic. From time to time, business, in fact international economy, has also experienced the effects of extreme climate events. Now, on top of all of this, there are the economic consequences of sharper geopolitical competition. The digital and the technology worlds have felt the implication of this polarization most visibly. After decades of hearing the virtues of globalization, today the world is grappling with the reality of industrial policies, export controls, and tariff wars. In such a scenario, it is essential to identify advantageous trends and adapt our policies accordingly. First and foremost, there is the widespread concern today about de-risking the global economy. The solution lies in more diversified manufacturing, Mr. Birla referred to it, in more innovation and technology, and in stronger trade, including those that pertain directly to food and health security. Put together, what that means is a re-globalization that is fairer, that is more democratic, that is less riskier than its earlier model.
What is so exciting is April 2nd is just around the corner, and that's American Liberation Day. That's the day when the rest of the world starts to treat America with respect. And your leadership, understanding how the rest of the world treats us and what balance and what fair trade finally is going to be, is going to take care of America. It's going to launch the External Revenue Service to start to build the power and prestige of America back. And I'm honored to be helping you on that course.
So India no longer needs to hide behind tariff walls because its industry is not competitive. That's what one of the tallest industry leaders has to say about the threat of Trump tariffs. Jamshed Naroji Godrej, chairman and MD of Godrej Employees, believes it's time for a shift, saying the current situation is very, very different from 1991 when the industry was far from competitive and tariffs were needed essentially to protect Indian enterprises. Godrej, however, emphasizes that India must focus on scaling industries like steel and cement while building robust supply chains that are sustainable and export-ready. Listen in.
India has always had high tariffs, right? Okay, why? Because we wanted to protect industry. What happened in 91? Okay, why did that whole system of deregulation take place? Why were tariffs cut? Why was the rupee significantly devalued? Okay, we have to be competitive. I mean, tariffs is all about competition. You know, if you're going to hide behind tariff walls, you know, you're not going to be competitive. I think this was the most important takeaway of 91, was that Indian industry was not competitive, which is why it had to go through that pain. Okay, today, industry is pretty good, very strong. As I mentioned there are many companies, you know, which are both global companies, Indian companies, everyone, and there are lots of them who are internationally competitive and doing a good job. But India is still tiny when it comes to manufacturing. So this is the challenge.
Okay, so with India potentially lowering tariffs on 55% of US imports, the outcome could, of course, have significant impacts on both nations' trade relations. Is there a possibility of Trump going soft on India when he announces reciprocal tariffs? We decode that in our next report.
As the clock ticks to Donald Trump's reciprocal tariffs, a high-powered U.S. trade delegation led by Brendan Lynch, the U.S. trade representative for South and Central Asia, reached Delhi this afternoon. Its 5-day mission in India to find a solution to the trade tariff standoff. The visit comes even as a report by Reuters says that an internal analysis by the government has estimated that reciprocal tariffs would hit 87% of India's total exports to the United States, worth $66 billion. The report adds that India is open to reducing tariffs on 55% of the goods it imports from the US. These goods are subject to tariffs ranging from 5% to 30%. India is said to be ready to substantially lower tariffs or even scrap some entirely. This, however, the report says, hinges on the US waiving off its reciprocal tariff. This comes on top of the overall reduction in import duties in Budget 2025. According to a government statement in Parliament, the simple average industrial tariff has reduced to 10.66% from 13.5% in 2023. The Finance Ministry has also introduced an amendment in the Finance Bill to reduce taxes on online ads, in a big relief to Google, Meta and X.
Clarificatory amendments in the provisions for IFSC's provisions and presumptive taxation for service providers for electronic manufacturing units is also being brought in as government amendment. And the third one, for clarity and consistency, a government amendment is coming in for small changes in the block assessment provisions. And then the 6% equalization levy, which was being proposed, which was in effect for advertisement and other things, is being proposed to be removed, so that we can address the uncertainty in the international economic conditions.
Indian equity markets, meanwhile, rose for a 7th straight session on Tuesday in hopes of diluted reciprocal tariffs. Fears over the sweeping tariffs seem to have lessened with US President Donald Trump's latest remarks that signal a softer stance than before. In what could be the latest recalibration of tariffs by Trump, he said several countries could get breaks.
April 2nd comes, that'll be reciprocal tariffs. But we may take less than what they're charging because they've charged us so much. I don't think they could take it. In other words, they've charged us so much that I'm embarrassed to charge them what they've charged us. But it'll be substantial. And you'll be hearing about that on April 2nd.
Trump, meanwhile, played another tariff card, threatening a 25% tariff on any country that buys oil or gas from Venezuela. According to an executive order signed on Monday, those tariffs will take effect on or after April 2nd. India is one of the big importers of Venezuelan crude oil and could face additional worries on this front. Bureau Report, Business Today Television.
So now, even as India is looking to combat the reciprocal tariffs, the tariffs being imposed on other countries will also impact India. For example, President Donald Trump announced a sweeping new tariff aimed at countries trading with Venezuela. Nations that purchase oil or gas from the Maduro regime will face a 25% tariff on all trade with America beginning April 2nd. That means India too will be affected. Why? Because India had only recently restarted purchases of Venezuelan crude after a nearly 3-year hiatus of US sanctions on the country. Now, reportedly, India imported around 22 million barrels of crude oil from Venezuela in 2024, representing that's about 1.5% of its total crude oil purchases during that period comes from Venezuela. So India too will be impacted by the announcement that's been made now by Donald Trump. So many layers really that India now has to look into. It's not just a clear reciprocal tariff that will hit India, but also steps like this, where you have other countries being punished, as a result of which India too could be punished.